Chapter 13 of The Dog with Golden Eyes. Stunned, Cassie sat, shaking her head. She had always read that wolves were bloodthirsty. Maybe some wolves were, but if Toki was a real wolf, he certainly wasn't bloodthirsty. He was lonely. Toki gave her another slobbering kiss and went to his dish. He put one pig paw on the edge and tipped it over. The dog kibble and meat shot all over the ground. He sniffed along it hard and at the kibble and glanced sideways at Cassie. He crouched down on his front legs, lay down completely, and rolled over the kibble in obvious delight. He wiggled back and forth over the dog biscuit while his tail thrashed the ground. Cassie stared. "You're supposed to eat that, you rascal, you." Toki finally stood up, shook himself hard, and to Cassie's horror, lifted his leg and peed over much of the dog kibble on the ground. Cassie was speechless with frustration. "After all I've done for you?" she said. Toki glanced at her, grinned, swung his tail, and went for the meat. He pushed the ground beef around before gobbling it down. At last, he ate the canned dog food. He licked his chops, wrinkled his nose at the dog kibble, and faced her. His tail swung, and then he crouched, inviting her for a walk. Cassie was still in a state of shock from her discovery. She watched him in a daze. She suddenly realized that the dry dog food was completely wasted. "Oh no," she exclaimed. "You're supposed to eat the dog kibble. You've got to eat the dog kibble. I bought it for you so you'd have enough to eat. I can't afford to feed you just meat." Toki swung his tail back and forth and wiggled in circles, scattering the dog kibble. "Wait, what are you going to do?" she said. Toki waved his tail harder, crouched, and gave her his funny lopsided grin. Was he laughing at her? He suddenly bounded toward the hill, looking back at her. Cassie shivered. Was she supposed to go walking with a wolf? She was sure there wasn't any more wild wolves in California, but the scientific part of her mind said, "You were friends with an Arctic wolf. How did he get here?" Toki's being a wolf explained a lot of things, like the size of his teeth and the strength of his jaws, making the holes in the stainless steel dish. She'd read that people would keep wolves for projects, like making movies, so maybe he was one of those. But being a wolf was the real reason he was slow to make friends. He hadn't been mistreated. He just wasn't a dog. She stood up, and Toki started up the hill towards the rabbit path. He looked over his shoulder, waved his tail, and bounded ahead. Okay, so he's a wolf, Cassie thought. Just because she hadn't known it before, that he was a wolf, and now she did, it didn't make a bit of difference if they were being friends, did it? What you name an animal doesn't matter. It's how you feel about each other. An electron ran through her electricity. No matter what he was, she and Toki were truly friends. She marched up the path, keeping her eyes on the wolf. He zigzagged across the hill behind her, and now hesitating at certain bushes to sniff and lift his leg and pee, now stopping abruptly to examine an invisible something of importance, then dashing off. She reached the flat rock and collapsed. When Toki bounded to her side and almost pushed her over with affection, she laughed and ran her fingers through his rough coat. Imagine me, she thought, Cassandra Beasley, friends with a wolf, the most beautiful white wolf in the world. She had a lot to learn about wolves and what they were really like. She needed to know how to take care of a wolf. Toki leaned against her and dropped down on her feet, thumped his tail and yawned. Oh, those enormous teeth, and stretched out beside her. He wiggled partly onto his back with his legs up in the air and his paws just dangling. The size of his feet were out of proportion for the rest of him. Cassie giggled. She ran her fingers down and forth over his stomach, and he whined and squawked with pleasure. The light was fading. Where does he spend the night? Cassie wondered. Every evening it was getting dark earlier. Suddenly she remembered that her mom would be coming home. Reluctantly, she stood up, pushed Toki with one foot. Time to go, she announced, stretching. He understood. He rolled over, stood up, staring into the distance, and trotted off in his strange bicycling gait, looked back at her once and waved his tail, and then disappeared around the side of the hill. "Good night," Cassie said in a low voice. "I'll see you tomorrow." She followed the rabbit path down the hill, still in the glow of her discovery. She was thinking hard. She knew that there were regulations about keeping exotic animals like lions and tigers outside of a zoo. There must be regulations about keeping wolves because wolves are wild animals too. But maybe she could keep Toki as a pet and not tell anyone he was a wolf. She wondered how long she could get away with that. Then a dreadful thought struck her. How would she feel if Toki was her wolf and she'd lost him? Whoever owned the wolf would miss him a lot and would certainly want him back. Cassie sighed. She would have to find out where he came from and give him back to his owners before animal control found him. She knew she had to do it. She found a wolf, but she had lost her dog. She could never take him to the vet for shots or put a collar on him or get a license for him. Her mind raced on. The big white dog had already been reported to animal control. Now that he was coming to the yard every day, suppose someone saw him who realized that he was a wolf. What would they probably do? Call the police? She could only hope whoever saw him wouldn't know that he was a wolf. Like Cassie, the neighbor might think he was a sled dog. Cassie wondered what the animal control officer would think if she found out the animal that she was looking for was really an Arctic wolf. When Cassie reached their yard, she got a rake out of the garage, gathered into a pile of chunks the spilled dog kibble, which had already started to dissolve from where Toki had peed on it, and managed to get most of the kibble with a dustpan. She stuttered as she examined again the teeth marks in the metal dish. She should have known that a dog wouldn't be able to do that to a steel dish. She poured the kibble into the garbage can, washed the dustpan and the brush, and hid them in the closet. What was she going to do with 40 pounds of dog kibble if Toki wouldn't eat it? If she didn't give him anything but meat and just kibble, would he eat the kibble? What if he wouldn't eat it and decided never to come back? Cassie went into her room, laid down on her bed thinking. Toki had to belong to someone, somewhere. And if there had been anything in the papers about a wolf, Mr. Cowell would have noticed. Maybe Toki had escaped from the compound where they were training him for movies and didn't want people to know that there was a wolf on the loose, even while they were looking for him. Maybe the best thing would be for her to advertise in the paper for Toki's owner, just like Mrs. Ulmer had suggested. Mrs. Ulmer would like that. Cassie would write the ad as though she had found just a white dog and would ask for whoever answered to give a complete description of him. His real owner would describe a wolf, even if the owner didn't say he was a wolf. And she couldn't give Toki to just anyone but his real owner. But not yet, she told herself. Toki was her friend. Right now she wanted most of all the chance to enjoy him, to learn more about wolves. It could be a great science project for her. She could see the kids in her science class staring at her in admiration. Lindsay would be sorry that she stopped being friends with Cassie for Shannon and Joanna. And Shannon and Joanna would want to be friends with her too. And they would ask her, "What's it like to have a wolf for a pet?" She and Lindsay would hang out together again and talk on the phone for hours. Cassie didn't hear the front door open and close. "Hi, I'm home," said her mother's voice. It didn't sound tired at all. Cassie went to the living room. Her mother was standing straight up in her uniform and smiling. "Hi, Mom. What's up?" asked Cassie, watching her mother's face. Her mother somehow looked younger. You don't need to fix anything to eat. I'm going out to dinner." "I came home for a change." "Going out? With who?" Once in a while, her mother and several of the other women, her mother always called them the girls, at the Red Baron Burger, went to a movie or someplace together. But this seemed different. Her mother shrugged. "Somebody I met at work." She went into her bedroom and shut the door. Cassie felt uneasy. She stood outside the door, cleared her throat, and asked, "Is it a man?" There was silence, and finally, Yes, it's a man, but don't worry, he's very nice. Cassie felt a shock. Twice she had started to say something but couldn't. And then she squared her shoulders and said boldly, "But Mom, aren't you still married to Dad?"